This is MakerGalaxy.
We're always talking about the future of design, the future of technology, the future of making. In a world where high school students can 3D print and revolutionize food packaging. A world where astronauts can take bracelets up to space that feature earthbound scents. How do we find the next big thing? MakerGalaxy is a show that explores the crossroads of design, technology, and the future of making. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Simon Martin, and this week we have a special interview featuring Adam O'Hearn and Josh Mings of the popular podcast EngineerVsDesigner, interviewing Kyle Studstill of MakeWay Magazine. MakeWay Magazine is a new publication that explores the current landscape of making, small business, and innovation. Josh and Adam talked with Kyle about everything from how MakeWay aims to help designers and makers, how crowdfunding works for new businesses from a holistic standpoint, as well as where he thinks the current maker revolution is going. Today's episode is brought to you by the new Objet 500 Connects 3 from Stratasys, the world's only color and multi-material 3D printer. Offering incomparably brilliant and consistent colors, plus transparent colors, the Objet 500 Connects 3 lets you create the most true-to-life modeling possible. Find out more at stratasys.com.
Kyle, thanks so much for joining us. It's great to have you on the show. If we could plug you into the Matrix and reprogram you to learn any skill you want.
Nice.
Okay, but in order to accept that skill, you have to use it while wearing a cheese hat every time. What would the skill be, and would you accept that?
Delicious cheese.
Yeah, cheese hat's great. So for me, I've spent a lot of kind of like amateur hobby time learning like illusion tricks, magic card tricks, that kind of stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
So I would love to be able to like skip forward in time and be able to like practice the art of deception in the way some of these like great masters I watch on YouTube. And what's great about it is the cheese hat actually acts as like a really great
distraction. Yeah, that's the perfect.
All right, sounds good.
Perfect
well, that actually worked
gimmick
out
to go along with it, I think.
unusually well for one of our opening questions. So, Kyle,
you
work
the cheese hat. That's what's great.
Right. Well, perfect. So you work on a little thing called MakeWay Magazine. We understand. Tell us a little bit about that. What is MakeWay Magazine all about?
So MakeWay is a guide to artisanal innovation. We kind of just made that term up, so we call it, kind of qualify it by saying it's a combination of artisanal entrepreneurs. These are the types who are creating quality, premium, purpose-driven products, and they're using innovative tools to help bring that to life in one way or another. And so what we're exploring is a lot of how that's developed, how that's happening, and how we can share the tools so that future makers can really bring great art to life.
Hang on. But give me a tangible example of a quality, innovative, artisanal object, if you would.
Yeah, so one of the things we dived into really deeply in the pilot issue is a group called WP Design. They create it's known as a mason shaker, like a cocktail shaker glass, but they've designed a special metal casing or metal top that allows it to act as a cocktail shaker. Sorry, it's a mason jar that has that special top. Anyway, they have a background in like industrial design, basically, and they've paired that with this kind of vision of a certain kind of lifestyle. Basically southern sensibility mixed with great cocktails and quality ingredients, and they use that to talk about the products that they're making in really kind of purpose-driven sense. So the quality part comes from the fact that they've had to go through any number of iterations and prototypes and blah, 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 just like any other industrial designer knows. What's interesting, because they did that through Kickstarter, they had, several rounds of earlier versions where they're having really close feedback from people who are saying, this is how it's working in my house, or it's not working in my house. and can we fix it, basically. And so the quality comes from there.
I'm looking on MakeWayMag.com, where everyone listening can find out more about MakeWay. There's a quote from Regina Connell, founder of Handful Assault, on there. It says, "I love what MakeWay is doing. It makes me shiver with delight. It's so necessary, so timely." Kyle,
I really hope nobody ever says anything like that about us.
Yeah, what are you doing to make Regina shiver?
Well, what's great is, so Regina runs what's known as Handful Assault. It's this, it's a publication dedicated to showcasing artisans and their products, basically.
Uh-huh.
And so, her and I were talking a couple weeks ago, and there's this kind of like cultural zeitgeist around the, we all see like kind of the maker movement, et cetera, right? But like there's now kind of more than ever this kind of longing for products that are produced with some kind of vision in mind, or some kind of meaning behind them, besides if I'm going to make this thing and I'm going to sell it. We've seen that too much over the last couple of decades, right? With like any kind of corporation that people tend to feel is like quote unquote inauthentic. Basically when she says it's so necessary, so timely, I think what she's really she's referring to is that idea of products that can be built with some kind of authenticity, but can also that ability is just now that's more it's easier now. I mean, it's
maybe
feasible now.
I'm going to get a little bit meta here for a second, and just talk about news, talking about news. Josh and I we're kind of semi-bad journalists in a way.
Yes.
And we're talking to you, who is also as semi-professional or professional journalist.
Probably
I'm not sure if you're full-time on this. and then we're talking about Regina's comments about you, Regina being another blogger. And is this a little bit self-referential, this whole thing that we're doing right now? Like, how do you feel about the fact that, I guess I don't have a real question attached to this, but I'm going to make one up. I'm going to make one up right now.
Fine. I have a great
How do you
answer,
feel
though.
about this thing that everybody is talking about making stuff, but are we actually contributing?
Yeah. I think the real answer that I have from my end is that, we put this thing out in the world as a way to start a certain kind of conversation. But our vision for it is something more along the lines of let's build a product for this world. And, we know that we're not going to be able to do that properly unless we have unless we share the findings that we're looking at that help explain why we're trying to build what we're trying to build. So, we use the MakeWay Magazine, as a way to talk about this as we want people to understand it as narrative content and less like a trends report, basically. Our background is in research and analysis of digital trends and innovation, et cetera. And so we're used to writing, content where it's just like, hey, let's talk about this thing and, let's pay attention to this thing and that's in the future or whatever. Very much self-referential stuff, like you were saying. And we got kind of bored of that, to be honest. And
it really seems like you're showing the desire is to show people how to take that next step. And you pretty much said that. People can download the magazine at the website. I take it you're offering it only on iPad as an iPad app and PDF, I guess, here also.
But it looks like you require a login to get the PDF. You have to register or something.
Oh, it's like subscribe by email kind of download. There's a couple things behind that. One of them that we're continuing to take notes as we speak to entrepreneurs, service designers, experience designers, et cetera, who are empowering this world. And so, we are ongoing content kind of continuing to share that with people who have downloaded the report.
Sure.
In other words, one way of looking at it is we want to tell the story of this new world that we're starting to see, a new model for business that we're starting to see. And that pilot issue you're seeing when you download it is kind of the briefing room for that world to explore. And so, So we do that as a way to give people a starting point and then continue on the journey. And there's also the kind of idea that, like I said, we want to build something that really provides utility for this world. And we want to be able to talk about, the kinds of people who are, excited, just as excited as we are to see it come to life. So, it's one of those things. On some level, it's like, oh, I'm going to have to get my email to get this thing. But we hope that people find it exciting enough that they really want to be a part of it.
Well, sure. And sometimes there's a level of curated community that's helpful. You're kind of you may have a smaller readership if you put up barriers like that, but that can also be that can work in your favor if you have a high quality audience as well. People that are actually interested in what you're doing.
Yeah, it's like, we want that content to breathe out in the open, sooner than later. So, when we originally were crafting all of the content, how we're going to put it on the world, we originally kind of were going down the route of like a, nice flashy HTML5 site that people could scroll through the content in a really interesting way. We ended up going the tablet route as a way to basically produce like an app. But
how come? What was the impetus behind that?
Well, a lot of it was we were having, a lot of the behind the scenes is that in order to do what we wanted to do in the way on HTML5 the way we wanted to do it, it would basically take way too many resources than we really had feasibly available to us. And so in the interest of let's start somewhere and let's do let's start with some iteration, even though it's not perfectly what we envisioned. We went down the route of building up a platform that it's called, it's a platform called Mag Plus. It turns anything you kind of would build in an app into like a magazine format for the iPad. And so that just let us put it out in the world a lot quicker, and so that we could start having the conversation sooner. But for sure, our intent down the road is to try and let it breathe in other forms as well.
Cool. Interesting. So what would you say is, this is always the hard question that you have to ask new businesses all the time. What are you trying to do? What's your goal with this?
Yeah, immediate, there's like kind of immediate term and long-term stuff, right? So immediately, I keep alluding to, something that I probably can't really speak about much because we have to do our proper homework and continue to think about it. But it's when we first started, probably 3/4 of a year ago, we had in our mind we started asking the question, like, what would we build for this world that we're seeing that would function as like a product or a utility or a tool? We started going down the route of seeing what interesting things are happening with, crowdfunding, especially as it relates to this like kind of small business artisan entrepreneurship world. We didn't want to build crowdfunding for small business because there's, already a number of people who are doing that. And we think that there's probably there's a lot of challenges that they're running into as they do so. And so we wanted to build something that taps into what our basic thesis is, that these kinds of experiences that people are putting together, like through crowdfunding, et cetera, they're acting as a way to both grow their business and market their product through the like natural evangelists that come through something like crowdfunding. So we wanted to tap into that thesis in a way, and so that's where our heads are at when we say we want to build something that kind of brings that to life. We want to build a product that helps test that theory. So that's kind of like an immediate term. Long term, we started from this place of being trends researchers, digital innovation strategists, looking at the most forward-thinking creative media stuff, et cetera. And what we very quickly, over time, you start to see like a few major like meta-level trend stuff, right? So there's stuff like everybody kind of familiar with. It's like the TED Talk stuff, like technology is empowering everybody. Millennials are this incredibly like interesting generation that's providing like a lot of new mindsets about how to think about the world and business. And there's things like conscious capitalism, the idea that businesses are having to rethink how they market themselves to people, and because people have more choice over the businesses they contribute to. All of these things we started to see as pointing to, what some people, we would sometimes borrow the term indie capitalism, It's been tossed around. Suffice to say, there's like this really interesting, juicy kind of like future of whatever you want to call it, business of the world. But we want to build things that help bring the best parts of that to life. I mean, if it starts with a product, that's probably a great place to start.
You said you didn't want to go the crowdfunding route with MakeWay. In the first issue of the magazine, though, you really get into crowdfunding platforms. With all that you guys researched and learned about, what did you learn? Is there a formula for successful crowdfunding?
Yeah, so I want to, to be clear, it's like, we didn't crowdfund this first thing we've done because we basically, no one would know what the conversation we're trying to talk about is at all. We've kind of kicked around now that we've started that conversation, what would that, if we did go through an exercise like, some kind of crowdfunding platform, what would that look like? And, we're using this time to like figure out what the community looks like before we kind of go that route. And then you kind of ask the question, what is it, is there that kind of formula for successful crowdfunding campaign? I don't know if there's like, I would say the formula is this. It's, the vision of an artist, like an entrepreneur who has like a real point of view that people can rally around, and we add the kind of what we would call like the vulnerability required to let others help build that. And neither one of those things is easy, right? So the first part is, creating a really powerful point of view or unique point of view, something that people can rally around and say, I want to be a part of that vision, and the product happens to be a part of that vision. And the other part is like the vulnerability required to, let people co-create that vision. And that's hard because, to the extent that you have like a really solid vision in your mind, is to the extent it's hard to let other people do that because it kind of, you have to work with the constraints of like people who actually use the product, right? And so, I think if there's a formula, it's something like that, and that's what we're seeing from the people that we've been talking to. They are able.
This is all very abstract. Can you bring any of this down into some concrete example?
Yeah. So I really like what Everlane has done. Everlane is online retailer. They sell men's and women's basics. They're a lot of their business from the idea of they're being transparent about everything. They do a lot of videos and content around here's the factories we work with, et cetera, right? So anyway, they're a small organization, and as they want to grow, they basically, they have a vision that a lot of people are really enthusiastic about. They start hearing.
Yeah, if you go to everlane.com, you'll see they say radical transparency on the front page, whatever that means.
Right. So, that generally means like they're showcasing a lot of their whole manufacturing process from, as it goes through factories, et cetera. And as they start to try and grow, they're like, well, lots of people are saying we should ship to XYZ country, but we want to do it smart because we don't have some resources to do some kind of huge market study. So they say, you know what, why don't we do something like a crowdfunding campaign, not necessarily to raise the funds to go somewhere to ship to other places, but rather just to see if there's genuine market interest there. And so, one, they have this kind of vision about how products should be made, and the whole transparency angle. And then two, they're growing in a smart way because they use crowdfunding in a smart way to say, hey, let's find out where people really want us to be. And it's a different way of growing the business, from a more command and control standpoint, from saying, hey, we want to now go into some other country, and so we're going to create some huge study, and we're going to make it happen no matter what. It's just a very different.
Absolutely. And that's actually a trend I've seen with other people in the business world who see crowdfunding as much as a way of proving a demographic exists, or proving that there is interest for a product, as opposed to just getting the funding. The funding is kind of secondary, which is kind of interesting.
I think that's why we've honed in so much on crowdfunding in what we're doing, because we think there's a lot of really interesting things happening that's more than just people are able to start a business from it. We see that note you said about testing market demand. We see, because they're building a kind of community through it that becomes their marketing. So all kinds of things that we think is really, really important to dive into.
Now, another thing that you talk about is this Harvard Business School idea you call the Ikea effect in the maker revolution. What does that mean? What is that all about?
Yeah, so the Ikea effect is kind of a Harvard School coined term. It reflects the idea that anything that you put effort into, you're going to feel more affable towards. So, it comes from the idea that when you build your own IKEA furniture, you tend to like it much more than even if it's like the worst looking, thing when it actually comes together. And the reason why we started looking at that is because a lot of, again, MakeWay started from a place of trying to understand what's happening in kind of like post-industrial age business, right? And so we started wondering, okay, what does loyalty mean in that post-industrial age empowered customer world? Traditionally in business metrics, it's like defined as stuff like repeat purchases or joining a marketing program or whatever. But we start to see, like I said, with crowdfunding, there's really interesting things happening there. One of which is now, because I've been a part of the development of this product, like I was saying, for example, with Mason Shaker, people were very vocal about, the cap doesn't fit the right way when I have a certain amount of ice, that kind of stuff. And so they were able to work with people who had a little bit of like insight in industrial design to create a better product from it. So now they came out with a better product, but also people who were that much more attached to the product because they helped build it. And we think there's like something really interesting in quote unquote loyalty that happens there. And we think that there's something to be said for how businesses think about loyalty in a different way because of platforms like Kickstarter.
Kyle, what exactly do you mean by post-industrial? That's a pretty polarizing term. A lot of definitions out there. A lot of people saying that's not the way things should be defined. What are you applying it to?
Yeah, so I kind of threw that term at you, and really, I just one of those terms but so meta. I try not to it's one of those terms that everybody has a definition for, and I'll say basically what I mean is, whereas businesses would thrive and succeed based on optimizing operations. So this is the all of your like classic business school thinking, optimize all of your transactions, make sure everything's most efficient, right? We're starting to see a shift. When I say, like a post-industrial age, we see more interesting things happening in terms of creating better experiences, building relationships with communities, and et cetera. So all I mean by post-industrial is basically just the fact that a business can no longer survive by optimizing transactions alone.
Oh, it's interesting. So, yeah.
We'll take it.
I'll take it. Sorry, just running that slowly through my slow mind here, but I think that's fair. That makes sense. Yeah.
It's basically, you hear it a lot of, again, like the TED Talk circuit. It's like, there's a new model of business, and no longer can you just broadcast things to customers. And whenever I say like, quote unquote, and I use terms like post-industrial just to mean that we know business as usual has changed, and we're starting to explore what the new models are.
And clearly that's true. I mean, I think that's unquestionably already true. It's not only the future, it's the present. The way that people interact with their customers has to change, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. I think what starts to kind of, what bothers me about that term, personally, is that when we look at the percentage of the world economy that is that are the Apples and the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, the kind of sexy technology companies that everybody's talking about that are changing the world, mm-hmm. Those are a very thin crust on top of steel manufacturers, people who are making raw materials, farming, the people that actually make the world around us happen. And I feel like those are still very traditional industries.
Well, still it applies. I mean, we're in a digital age. I almost think we could get rid of post-industrial altogether and call it post-internet. age. I mean, because that is just it just blankets the entire world. I mean, even to the developing countries. I mean, they might not have a way to make manufacture steel parts, or dig iron ore out of the ground and make tools, but they can get on their cell phones and talk to their friends. I mean, we're in a time where people have the tools, the digital tools to sort of do whatever they like,
to connect to one another in a different way.
Yeah,
But the internet is built on. I mean, it's a physical thing, right? That's the crazy thing about the internet. People think of it as this ethereal thing, but it's a physical thing. It's a bunch of cables connecting people to each other. And I think that's an industrial thing.
I like where you're going with it, because one of the things we talk about a lot is the kind of shift from we talk about it as like a barbell kind of like you could call it barbell economics or whatever. Basically, the idea that the future isn't like big businesses or small businesses or one kind of industry over another kind of industry. It's really just the fact that there are lots of big businesses that will continue to thrive, and then there's more and more small businesses that we're on the other end of the spectrum that we're seeing that are now have the tools and resources to thrive and survive and compete on the scale that large businesses of any industry are. So I think you're right. And I think it's particularly relevant to like the things that you guys are exploring with basic product makers who are building fantastic products. I think they fit in that world where we see more and more of those types of people bringing a certain kind of idea to life through the tools of business.
Yeah, and in a sense, you guys there at MakeWay are like that. And an example of who you write about also, I sense a book coming out about how you made all this happen in the future. But I'm wondering what advice you would have for people who want to set out on their own, create their own brand, build their own product. What are you recommending to others in the magazine and when you talk to people?
Yeah, we rely heavily on this idea of co-creation in many different forms. So one form of that is kind of the crowdfunding, Kickstarter kind of model, relying on people to help build through your support. We also see really interesting things happening in new kinds of collaborative models. So we focus on a couple of people who have done really great things in that world. One is Holstees. They primarily print and sell letterpress cards that are well designed. They do it through a series of design collaborators who just want to be part of the Holstee vision. I should actually say, first and foremost, Holstee is like an organization that's driven by a certain kind of vision about living your life in a certain way you love, and et cetera. But because they're able to have these collaborators, they're building, they have like an artist series. Okay, lots of people do that. But then what they've done is created this product that's specifically for rotating that series of artists and their designs through it. So it's like a frame which that you would hang one of their like beautiful cards up in. But they built a subscription model into that product where it's like you buy the frame, and then if you want, you can buy the subscription model for the next 6 months. You're going to get the newest design from our collaborators. And it's, all of this has been, really interesting way to build Holstee as a brand through the communities of artists who also have their own followings, and they're able to share a lot of the vision together. So I think that it's like, you ask the question, what are the tools that are, what's the advice for people who are, trying to build a brand? It's done, as we've seen in this world, through the communities of the other like-minded organizations.
That actually brings up a really interesting part of this whole thing that I think maybe not a lot of people are talking about. I think we talk all the time about the importance of the social aspect of building a brand, of building a business. It's very important these days that a brand be a bi-directional, or I guess multi-directional, manifold conversation happening across an entire network of people. That's the whole idea. It's organically building whatever your crowdfunding, your crowdsourcing, your crowd, everything. But at the same time, if you look at any, how to start a business book in the traditional sense, if you want to start a restaurant or whatever, then you need to have a business plan. And that plan hopefully is going to include a lot of detail about exactly what you want to do and how you want to get there. And you're going to give your 5-year plan, and here's what we're going to do first, and here's what we're going to do next, and I have this vision for this as it's going to be. How do you reconcile those things where you have the organic side of it that's happening all the time really fast and furious, and then at the same time, it just seems crazy to throw planning out the window entirely and just go with the flow? Or am I just stodgy and old-fashioned?
No, you're right. I don't think that throwing away the tools of business is the right answer at all. I think there are very important fundamentals that, when I say what we're aiming to do is to empower artists who have a vision that they want to bring to life through the tools of business. I say tools of business as in, there's very smart fundamentals to be working with.
Right.
As a kind of like a editorial strategy, I guess you could say, we specifically chose to focus on one particular thing, which is not management, which is not finance. There's great publications out there that are teaching those tools.
Sure. And I didn't mean to aim that at you. It was more a question just about how you reconcile that stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that you're right. I think, there are, the tools of business, have changed in one way, like where we see models of co-creation and relationship building over optimizing transactions is, something we talk about a lot, but that doesn't mean that using intelligent, business mindsets to optimize your operation isn't a smart thing. And we usually, I think about it as, don't abandon it, but you have to be mindful of why you're operating your business in a certain way. If it's purely to optimize transactions, you might run into trouble down the road, but at least maybe now you know the trade-off.
Absolutely.
Well, Kyle, this is it's been fabulous to find out more about MakeWay. Everyone, you can find out yourself more about the magazine at MakeWayMag.com. Kyle, what's coming up in? Do you do issues every month? Are they every quarter?
We've had ongoing content with different interviews that we've been doing, case studies that we're illustrating. We're doing that basically in kind of like a journal form. So there's journal.makewaymag.com. And then as far as like special reports, so, if you think about like the tablet app right now is kind of like a more like heavy piece kind of special report. We're now in conversations with the next brand partner that we want to, coordinate with to help tell the next part of the story. I mean, because the truth of the matter is, like I was saying before, we want to potentially explore how do we continue doing it through crowdfunding, et cetera, or, what the next iteration is. But, there's more of the story we want to tell in one shape, form, or another. But we're relying heavily on the community that's developing now to help try and explore them, try to bring it to life.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Kyle, it was great speaking with you. Having you on the show today, I'm told, was even more fun than that time Josh tried to kickstart a 3-piece suit made from birdseed. But was actually attached by pigeons trying to get to the filming. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys.
Today's episode was brought to you by the new Objet 500 Connects 3 from Stratasys, the world's only color and multi-material 3D printer. Offering incomparably brilliant and consistent colors, plus transparent colors, the Objet 500 Connects 3 lets you create the most true-to-life modeling possible. Find out more at stratasys.com. Thanks for listening in today, and if you'd like to find out more about Kyle and MakeWay Magazine, you can download a copy for free over at MakeWayMag.com. I'm your host, Simon Martin. Stay tuned and check in with us next week on MakerGalaxy.
a production of EVD Media.